The Marketing Festival 2019 here in Prague has just ended, and we are thrilled that we can present you interviews with some of the best speakers that were here today. Here on the Marketing Festival 2019 in Prague, here with me is Wil Reynolds, who was a great speaker with an amazing presentation. He's also the founder of s.r.o, and we will ask him a couple of questions about the future of search. What was the key message of your today's presentation here on Marketing Festival?
Sure, so my presentation today was about the future of search and where we see search going, and how I think we have to move as an industry away from best practice, because Google's gotten so good at understanding searching at an individual, location, device level, that I don't think you can apply best practices across industries, devices, or search types.
You were also talking about how we should more focus on what the searchers really search for. So I was wondering, how could we implement it in today's world in our practice?
Sure, so the other part I talked about is actually the human part of like watching someone search. And the problem is when you're a professional searcher, which we all are, you get really good at searching. So therefore we make assumptions about what people do when they look for solutions, and oftentimes they're not true. So in watching people search, I think the first thing you want to do is get a tool like Validately, a tool where you can ask someone questions and be careful of the questions you ask. You don't want to bias the person and say, what would you search for to find an SEO company? Instead, you say something like, if you were looking for an organization like mine, what would you search for? And you use the word like organization, not company or firm or agency, because then you bias their search. And then you watch someone click on different results and you ask them questions like, well, what do you think about this site? Do you trust it? Do you like it? Was it easy to read? Those kinds of questions start to have you get a feel for whether or not you're really solving the person's problems in very real ways. One of the coolest examples that we ever did for a client is we talked to one of their customers, and she talked about the reason why she picked our client was because she was on a fixed income. So the way that she was going to pay her bill every month was very important to her to be able to save for her grandkids for Christmas. Like, I would have never had that understanding in typical keyword research, and we find that that helps our team to be more empathetic to who's searching, and then that makes us better marketers as a whole.
My next question is about wasting of time in SEO. What practices would you not recommend to do anymore and consider them waste of time, basically?
Sure, I think the biggest issue is when people start deploying tactics without having any data that tells them that those tactics should be done. So I find a lot of people are like building links to build links, and they don't necessarily know what types of links they need, how many they need, and that's part of the problem with link building. It's like, you know, say to a client, hey, we need links. It's okay for a client to say, how many do you think we need? 10, 20? Okay, so once I get 20, is that good, or should I go for 200? Well, more links is good. And you're like, well, that's a bad answer, right? So I feel like link building just for the sake of link building is one of the things that I think our industry is kind of just doing. And I also feel like people are also doing the same thing with content. It's become like, how quickly can I get it out? Instead of, who's searching for this? How could we really help them solve their problem? So it leads people to just cranking out tons of content and not really knowing if that content's ever going to help anybody really solve their problem.
And my last question is, who is your favorite rapper?
My favorite rapper right now is J. Cole. He's freaking awesome. Everybody needs to listen to J. Cole. He's amazing.
Okay, so for the Czech audience, be sure to check it. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Hello everyone, we are here with Ritson. I think that with one of the biggest names in today's world's marketing, and he has some good stuff about a marketing strategy here today, and we will go to ask him some questions, so let's do it. Let's go. What are the things that you should know to choose right channels and the right message?
It's really important before you make the channel choice to step back and think about the strategy. If you get the strategy right, the channel choice becomes a lot more clear. And ultimately this comes down probably, I would say, to three main factors. You have to look at who you've decided to target. Are you going after everyone? Are you going after a smaller group? What's the media habits of that group? The second thing you have to ask yourself is, what is your position? Positioning isn't just something you communicate in your TV ad, it's whether you do TV ads in the first place. If you're an exclusive brand, for example, you shouldn't do outdoor because outdoor is not an exclusive medium. And then the third constraint is budget. Depending on how much money you have, some doors open and some doors close. So I think getting a clarity on how much money you have, what is the position, and who is the target is the factors that will indicate which media and channels to work with and which ones not to.
What would you recommend to small companies with small budget when they want to create appropriate marketing strategy?
The first thing to tell a smaller company that doesn't have a huge budget is that in some ways they have an advantage. There is a little bit more time, there's a little bit less pressure, and they can really spend a significant amount of time just working through, what are the right strategic choices. I think the two things I would always advise smaller companies to do is, first of all, use strength as an advantage. It sounds weird, but being a smaller company means you're hotter, you're growing, you're still changing, you have a founder perhaps. And so play those strengths. Don't try and be a big company. When you're a small company, use the weapons of your advantage in your approach. And then the second thing with a smaller organization doing strategy is don't try and do too much. Strategy is deciding what you're not going to do, so you really have to be incredibly choiceful about how many brands, about how many channels, how many products. You've really got to keep it very focused. And I would say the one big thing is don't try and have too many brands too early. Nothing is more helpful than to have a single brand and focus all your efforts on it.
What were the biggest challenges during your work for Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy?
Well, there was many. I spent 15 very happy years at LVMH. The first problem I had was being an Anglo-Saxon working in a Latin company. Anglo-Saxons think differently from Latins, and it took a while to get my head around that, but I worked it out, and they are lovely people. And then I think the biggest issue is creativity. If you look at the number 2 person in normal companies, it's the CFO. In any luxury brand, especially at LVMH, it's the creative director. The president or CEO is the number 1. The number 2 is always the creative director. And so I think the big challenge for me was recognizing that creativity, something I fundamentally have no skill in at all, is something you have to respect and understand and factor into your thinking. And I think that was the biggest challenge, is just realizing that you'll work with people who are very different from you, usually younger, usually non-linear thinkers, very hard-working. How do you make sure you can work in a team with them so they understand you and you understand them? And I think that's crucial to success in luxury.
So welcome, I'm here with Samuel Scott, and I will ask him for some question about future trends of digital marketing and about some myths in the marketing.
Ahoy everybody, it's great to be in Prague.
What is the key message of your presentation?
My basic theme is that the word content is the worst word in the English language or any language, because first of all, it's a big myth that consumer brands and tech companies need to produce all this informational material, blog posts and infographics and podcasts and who knows what else, when the truth is, it's a gigantic waste of money. So at best, it's a waste of money, but at the worst, content is a word that has become to be used to refer to any marcom under the sun. Advertising online is content. PR campaigns is just content. Even Netflix movies is just content. So if the word content means everything, it means nothing useful. And my point is that we need to think more strategically and tactically by using the right language and the right tactics.
What trends will shape the marketing environment in the future?
I'll be a bit of a contrarian here with this point. The biggest trend in marketing is that marketing doesn't really change that much, but people think it does. In the end, marketing is the creation of a product, figuring out the best price for the product, figuring out how you're going to get the product to the customer, and how to promote the product. And under the promotion mix, you have a choice of tactics and a choice of channels. Pick and choose which ones you want and measure the results. That is all marketing is, and that's all marketing will ever be. The only difference is that now we have more channels that we can use or not use. We didn't have the internet, now we do. We didn't have podcasts, now we do. We didn't have AdWords, now we do. So we can use these channels or not. But in terms of the big picture, marketing doesn't change, and anyone who says it differently is selling something.
According to you, what are the biggest myths in marketing?
The biggest myth in marketing is that advertising is dead. In the US alone, advertising spend increases around 3% every single year. And if advertising is dead, then why do I still see fucking ads everywhere I go? Pardon my French. But I still see advertising everywhere. Online, offline, in the plane on the way here, in my hotel room, in magazines. Advertising is clearly not dead. But again, whoever says advertising is dead is probably selling you something.
First of all, what was the key message of your today's presentation?
So my key message, I was talking a lot about how I think consumer behavior is changing a lot, and the technologies that power the very kind of architecture of the web are changing a lot. Things like the rise of voice search and personal assistance. And we haven't really stopped and considered what that means for marketing and for digital marketing, and things are really about to change. We're going to enter an age when consumers increasingly offload their decision making to third-party systems, where they're not necessarily there themselves in part of the funnel, and where a lot of the tactics that we use suddenly stop working. I think we rely very heavily on interruption as a tactic, and you can't interrupt the consumer if they're not there. And we need a plan for what we do about that. I don't know what that is, but we need to think about it.
My second question is about the tips for survival in digital marketing in the future, where you mentioned that clicks and conversions rate aren't going to be the center of digital marketing anymore. So what will be in the center?
I think clicks and conversions are still important. We still need to sell things, we still need to convert visitors, but I think the role of the website is maybe a little less important as people spend more and more time in apps and on platforms in places like Facebook and Twitter. I know Instagram just launched checkout capabilities this week, so people can now buy things from within Instagram, which starts to raise this really interesting question of why should anybody ever come to your website? And our current model is based on getting people from these environments to your website, because then you can track them, you can measure them, you can measure clicks and conversion rates. We don't really have a mental model for how that works when people don't need or even necessarily want to come to your website. So we need to ask some difficult questions there.
And is there anything we can do about it? Should we focus on the platforms more and leave the website strategy, or what is your ideas on this?
Oh, it's a really tough question, because I think it could go in a number of different directions. I think a bit of both. I think we definitely need to stop thinking about our websites as the center of the universe, and we need to stop assuming that the way we should work is to try and build bigger websites with more pages and more visits, and maybe start thinking at least a little bit about how do we start to use our websites as vehicles for brand storytelling, for hubs for the kind of ideologies our brands stand for, and then maybe start to drip feed that through the platforms where our consumers are, using things like different formats like AMP, like Facebook Instant Articles, Apple News, Instagram Stories. We can start to use our website as hubs to drive some of that storytelling.
As you already mentioned, in the future SEO there will be probably more focused on brands and telling story. I just want to know, how does it involve us SEOs in this process, and if we will be needed or if we will have to adapt?
I think a lot of people treat SEO the same way they treat all of their other marketing and acquisition channels. They look at it in terms of how many people did we get in, what percentage did we convert. I think that means that there are a lot of behaviors and a lot of parts of the marketing cycle where many SEOs aren't present. A lot of purchase decisions take 4, 5, 10, 20 searches, visit multiple websites, start off with broad, vague questions, and only later at the very end narrow down to, okay, I want to buy this specific thing. There's a real opportunity for SEOs to position content and brand messaging and maybe some commercial stuff much earlier in that journey. You can produce supportive content that changes the actions that users take as they go through that journey, and maybe means that brand A wins rather than brand B wins. You can manage that funnel.
And my last question is about WordPress. Yes. So, what, in your opinion, are the biggest downsides of WordPress in terms of SEO? Is it a good platform if you want to rank well, or is there any correlation in your opinion?
So I would get shot if I didn't say this, but I truly wholeheartedly believe it. I think that for 99-point-something% of brands and websites, the combination of WordPress and obviously Yoast SEO is the best choice. And that's for a whole bunch of reasons. One, that WordPress out of the box is quite good at SEO there, that's contentious. Certainly with the addition of the Yoast plugin, it's the best out of the box option there is. And then for edge cases, it's built in a way that it can be incredibly flexible. Like WordPress itself and the Yoast plugin are built to be flexible. I find it very very hard to imagine use cases where, unless you're doing something extremely odd or extremely large, that it's not the best fit. Like, we spend so much time considering what the best default should be for everybody, but also providing capabilities for them to change that, and then field testing that for weird scenarios and edge cases and odds and ends. So yeah, I think the only downsides are maybe if you're doing something incredibly crazy, but otherwise it's super powerful.